Hello. Welcome back. We're still continuing with the English colonies, and let's get on to today's lesson. We're going to have to do a little bit on the Mayflower. I'm going to add something right here, Protestant Reformation. You have to know that, or you're not going to understand the significance of the Mayflower and the Pilgrims. So we're going to add that. And then quickly, let's see. Okay, so first and foremost, the Pilgrims are a manifestation of this Protestant Reformation. And one of the reasons we care about the Pilgrims is because they reflect American attitudes and American values, right? And so we study in depth their organization, and that tells us about ourselves today and in other contexts. So anyway, that we have to go through, because our origins are really the Puritans in Jamestown in England. And so if you understand where they're coming from and why they're coming and then what they want to do here, that's the mix that is going to be America. And so it's really you can find still elements of the Puritans in American culture, and they really impact our development. So it's really important that you understand it, in my view. So we're going to look about the religion with the Mayflower Compact, Plymouth Colony, Massachusetts Bay Colony. John Winthrop, he is at Massachusetts Bay. The Great Migration, that's going to be about Massachusetts Bay. Sprite for New England is going to be both the two colonies, the Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay. Those are the only colonies that are going to be a big deal in New England. Meanwhile, we're going to look at the cultural connections, the Protestant work ethic. We'll look at Harvard, how that fits into all of this. And Hutchinson, who is a very important factor, as well as Roger Williams in Rhode Island. These are very strongly connected. Why? Because, just short answer is, they did not cooperate. Or a better word is they did not conform. Okay, they did not conform to the laws of the Puritans. So we'll keep going on that, and then we'll talk about separation church and state with Roger Williams is really important for that one. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so the first thing you have to understand in order to understand the Pilgrims is that you have to understand what's going on with this thing called the Reformation. Okay, you're going to have a tremendous amount of upheaval because of it. So first and foremost, the main church in Europe is a Christian church. You have to understand, well, what does it mean to be a Christian? You have to believe in the ideas of Jesus and the New Testament. Okay, that's fundamental. So the dominant church, the big church, was called the Roman Catholics, and they emerge 300 AD in the Roman Empire. Remember, Constantine has a vision and converts to Catholicism, Roman Catholicism, and it's organized, and everywhere where the Roman Empire touched automatically became Roman Catholic. Fast forward up to 1517, this guy Martin Luther, who was an old priest or monk, was complaining about the Roman Catholic Church. And he said, look, this church is corrupt. They're not focused on the Bible. It's more about money and power and influence and less about the religion and the teachings of Jesus. And he advocated, let's get back to, first thing he did was he said, I protest the church. Boom. I protest the church. And he listed his protests. It's called the 95 Theses, 1517. And because he did this, this idea, this protest became very popular with a whole bunch of other people. Some of them government people like kings and queens, in Europe. And so you get a split now. And the result of this protest is that we got two groups. We've got Protestant, which are believing in Jesus. They believe in Jesus, but they believe closely to the Bible only, not the hierarchy of the organized church. So mostly the Bible. They translate the Bible into the vernacular, the language of the people, things of that nature. And then the other group is called the Roman Catholics. Okay, so we got these two groups. Now, the Roman Catholic kings and queens supported the Pope in Rome. Get it? Remember that? And so they weren't happy that the Roman Catholic Church didn't like that the Protestants were rejecting their ideas and control. And so there was wars, a whole bunch of wars between the Roman Catholics versus the Protestants and vice versa. And so the kings and queens attack the other kings and queens, attack the other kings. And so it becomes massacres of people being murdered because of their belief in church, as well as the control. It's very complicated. But it starts with the 1517. 1517, it starts a whole bunch of wars. And the two groups are Roman Catholic monarchs and Protestant monarchs. Okay? And then there's periodic wars. And that's the context for the Pilgrims. Again, the Pilgrims are 100 years later. The wars are still going. Hostility is still going. These are examples of Protestant church. So again, Roman Catholics, Protestants. So Quakers, Southern Baptists, Anabaptists, Mennonite, Amish, other Baptists, Lutherans, that's Martin Luther's 1521, Presbyterians, Episcopal, Anglican, Congregationist, Methodist, Salvation Army, okay, Methodist, Holiness, Pentecostals. Okay, so it's all of these, and you can throw in here Calvinist right there, Calvinist. And so all these religions are going on at the same time. Cool? I'm going to skip that for a minute. So just look at this map. This shows you the different religious divisions, okay? Green is Catholics. So Spain and Portugal, Catholic. Most of France, Catholic. Most of the Italian states, Catholic. There you go. And then you have all these other, look at the Lutherans, Germany, okay? Calvinist, Scotland, Switzerland. Anglican, boom, in England. Now, so this is what's happening. Different monarchs liked the Reformation or they didn't like the Reformation. Okay, they liked the Protestants and they wanted to get rid of the Catholics, or they liked the Catholics. All right, that's the way it sizes up. In England, let's go back. In England, and this is all leading up to the Puritans, you had Henry VIII created, Henry VIII created the Anglican Church. And it just means the Church of England. And then that is the first Protestant church. Okay? And so, and his daughter, Mary, whose mother was Catholic, she was Roman Catholic, was repressing the Catholics. And she's famous. She's really interesting. Bloody Mary, because she burned so many of the Protestants, people who were going against the leadership of the church that she identified with, were heretics and to be killed. And so it's like a civil war. She's gone after a while, right? She's gone after just a short time. And then later on, her stepsister, Elizabeth I, she was Protestant. She supported Henry VIII's Anglican Church, okay? And so the Protestants are winning. Well, then you get a bunch of these Stuarts. Stuarts were from Scotland, and they were sympathetic to the Catholics. And that's our story where the Puritans come in. So remember, the Puritans rise here. The Puritans rose out of... Is this a good color? What's a good color? They came from the... during this era. Okay? They came during Mary's era and during Elizabeth's era and during Henry's era. That's when the Puritans, which were hardcore Protestants, saying we want pure religion, that's when they come about. Well, guess what happens to the Puritans under James? James is a Roman Catholic. So is his brother Charles. Okay, these guys are related. I think he's his son. James the first and Charles the first. So James was a Catholic, and he's repressing the Puritans. The Puritans left, remember, they leave under his reign. And then his son comes in, and he's a Scot, right, from Scotland. And he's a Catholic too. And then you get a massive repression of the Puritans. The Great Migration is right here, which we're going to talk about. And then you have the Civil War. This is the English Civil War. They killed Charles I. They cut his head off. And then Cromwell dies, and then you get Charles II, who's also Catholic. And then you get James II, who's also Catholic. And then you get Mary, who is Protestant. Okay? Do you understand? Hopefully you do. Please ask questions later if you don't get it. All right. So what's significant about all of this? Here's a poem. They cry, they roar for anguish sore, and gnaw their tongues for horror. But get away without delay. Christ pities not your cry. Depart to hell, there may you yell and roar eternally. Former students wrote this. No, just kidding. First of all, what you should notice is this is a reference to hell and Christ, right? It's religion, hardcore religion, and that relates to the Puritans. What you see here is a cutaway of the Mayflower. The Mayflower was a very small ship and was usually a cargo ship, but right here they put a ton of people. If you watch this short video, it's about 5 minutes. It's about the Mayflower. It's very interesting. If you watch this one, it's a lot longer, and it really goes into this book, which is called The Mayflower by Nathaniel Philbrick. This is a great historian who makes really easy to read history, and I really recommend it if you get a chance. I may have you read some of it. Continuing. So first thing you have to know is that religion is a huge part of the New England colonies. Okay, that's one big idea. So again, and there are two groups that you got to know about. The first are the Puritans. Again, they are English Calvinists, and they want to purify Christianity. They want to be focused on the Bible. and not the hierarchy. They don't really like priests. They like preachers, but they don't like the priesthood. They don't like images. They don't like stained glass windows and all this stuff. They want only the Bible. They say Bible is where it's at, and they want to live their life according to the Bible. So we would say they're extremist. Okay, they're extremist Puritans. And remember, King James was repressing them, and later Charles. And these guys are known as the separatists. And what's special about the separatists is that they were the extreme Calvinists. And so they're super duper conservative fundamentalists. And we call these separatists, these extremists, Pilgrims. And they wanted to break away from England, and they wanted to create their own religious society on their own so that they could live a religious life. So these guys are fundamentally a cult, fundamentally a extreme religious fanatics. And those were the Pilgrims. They did not have enough money on their own to create an expedition for the New World. So they worked with another group called the Adventurers in this group called the Plymouth, the Virginia Company of Plymouth. It was Plymouth, England is where the company was organized. And they joined with, remember the Joint Stock Company? This is a joint stock company. About 50 Puritans and 50 non-Puritans, we call them the Adventurers, pooled their resources in this company, Plymouth. They bought the Mayflower, which is the ship that they could afford, and they set out on an expedition to create a location in the New World. And so they end up having severe problems. So let's go, I'm going to show you a map for a second. Let's look at a map. So a map of the colony. So just imagine, by the way, this is called New England right there. This is called the Middle Colonies, and this is the South, okay? So the Pilgrims were supposed to land here. They were supposed to land at New York. They had, their authorization was for New York. But what happened was they made a bumpy ride to the New World, and they hit this part called Cape Cod. They hit there first. They got off the boat, and they traveled around Cape Cod, stole some food. Some of the first thing they did was stole food from the Indians. And then they started going south again, and they hit this really dangerous area called the Shoals. And they got scared, and they said, no, let's come back. And they wound up right there. Boom. They wound up right there in this little spot. That was Plymouth. That becomes the colony of Plymouth. Right here. All right. They were supposed to go to New York. This is New York. This is Manhattan. The Dutch were down here a little bit. That's where they're supposed to go. 65 days, which was really long, 102 people, 50 of them were Puritan separatists, the hardcore Christians. First thing they do is they create this thing called the Mayflower Compact. And the reason why this is important is that it is another one of those manifestations of democracy. Right? It is about, voting, but it's not a government, it's not a constitution. What it is, a compact is what we call a contract or a covenant. If something is a covenant, it's a religious contract. And so compact, covenant, and contract are about the same. And all it said was, we agree that we're going to abide by the rules of the colony. We're going to work together, and we're going to abide by the laws that we make as a community. So they always point back to that House of Burgesses and voting, etc. All right. Now, this slide is going to relate to both, and just come back to this slide if you need it. Again, we're doing Sprite. Remember Sprite for the southern colonies and for the New England colonies. That's kind of your end game. But what I want to show you here, this relates to Massachusetts Bay. Now, real quick, Plymouth is going to be this one. Boom. This is small Plymouth. This is going to be Massachusetts Bay. And eventually, they will conglomerate them together and they will call it Massachusetts Colony. But in the earliest phase, there were two colonies, Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. Okay? And so the social aspects, if it has an MB here, that means it's Massachusetts Bay also. Coolidge, you get it? So these are common elements to both Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. And I think that's one way you need to really know that they're similar. So let's take a look. One, social aspects, traveled in families. So it's, and again, when they have these common elements, I want you to contrast it with Jamestown. Jamestown doesn't have these things, most of them. You know, Jamestown, it's men. Plymouth, it's families. Massachusetts Bay, it's families. Very religious. Jamestown is not so religious. Small population. That's only Plymouth has a small population. Some cooperation with Indians and later conflicts. That's both Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. Literacy is extremely important. Number one reason why they want people to be literate is to be religious. The Bible. The Protestants believe that the Bible is the focus for Christian religion, and so you should be able to read the Bible in Christian religion. Other aspects. Economic aspects. No large plantation. Again, this plantation is farms. Small land holdings. That's both Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. All of this is Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth. They traded fur, fish, lumber. Tobacco wasn't good in the north, so they didn't really have that. And that's a geographic issue. So remember, geography makes a difference for that essay question. Political, male-dominated. They have elections. William Bradford is only in Plymouth. He stays there for 30 years. And they have these things called town hall meetings, which are very important. A big deal with Plymouth in political is that you had to be a member in good standing of the church. So technically they were separate church compared to state, but you couldn't vote unless you were a good member of the church and recognized as following the rules of the church. Okay. Let's talk about Massachusetts Bay. Once again, Massachusetts Bay, this is a joint stock company colony, but the investors were Puritans. Their leader is a guy named John Winthrop. You have to know his name. From 1630, they had 1,000 settlers come in 1 year. They land at Boston. So already that's going to be a lot of more population that you have at Plymouth. Plymouth is a very small population in Plymouth. That's a big idea. And think about this. John Winthrop, he's a Puritan. He's not the separatist, but he's still a Puritan. And his big message, and this is a quote you have to memorize, for we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of the people are upon us. So this idea says, this shows you they're totally religious fanatics. They say, we are going to show the world that we can create a religious society, a civilization based on religious beliefs, and will be a shining example to the world. This metaphor is used over and over again in the United States, and it comes from this man. So you really have to know John Winthrop. So just finishing up, Massachusetts Bay, very religious, city upon a hill. Sometimes you see this guy, John Cotton. He was a prominent clergyman, religious leader. Again, this is political. Adult free men, part of the congregation, part of the church, could vote, having town hall meetings. You did have property requirements. You had to be adult male, head of the household with some kind of land to vote. And then lastly, we'll finish up with this, the Great Migration. Within 1630s, with the English Civil War, remember Charles that we saw on the other one, and Cromwell takes over later on, you will have 20,000 Puritans move to Massachusetts Bay, and they will then spread out through the rest of New England, and that culture is going to be fundamental to New England for hundreds of years. So we have to pay attention to the Great Migration. And this is also another trend. Look at this trend. Virginia will only have 42,000 after 100 years, where New England will have 87,000 in less than 70. Which means, what does it mean? It means that New England will start a trend. We'll have a higher population, and the South will have a lower population. And that continues through American history.